let's come back to the energy sector, where a new report just released by Horsepower shows that the strong demand for mini-grid electricity in sub-Saharan Africa is rising across the region, with the estimated capital expenditure in the subsector estimated between $28 billion and $46 billion US dollars. Joining me to discuss this is the author of that report and giving me some analysis into that. For the first time in the new year, William Brent is the Chief Marketing Officer at Horsepower. It's good to see you, my friend, in the new year. Good evening.
Good evening. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me again.
Great to see you. Give me some highlights. And I'm sure the last time we had some conversation around mini-grids in Africa was the Mission 300 World Bank EFDB summit in Dar es Salaam, I think about a year ago or so, just about this time, I guess. So where are we right now as far as your analysis is concerned around the drive for mini-grids by African governments?
So maybe just set the context a little bit. The World Bank, as you mentioned, is one of the sponsors of Mission 300, along with African Development Bank. In 2023, the World Bank concluded that community solar mini-grids were the most capital-efficient way to electrify 380 million people in sub-Saharan Africa. So about over half of the people who are currently unelectrified, still unelectrified in sub-Saharan Africa, would be best served with highly reliable quality electricity from mini-grids. So that's what the bank said. As part of Mission 300, it's still been unclear as to what is the demand on the part of governments within Mission 300. As Mission 300 is basically, since, as you mentioned, in Tanzania, when they kicked off the initiative, they've been signing energy compacts with national governments. Those energy compacts are commitments from those governments for both grid extension, for mini-grids, as well as other distributed solar products like solar home systems. But we haven't been had clarity up until this point about what that demand was. And the new analysis that we did as part of this report showed that the demand was very high. Based on our analysis, from 29 countries that signed those compacts, we're looking at somewhere around 23 million connections, which would be equivalent to electrifying about 116 million people.
So what's driving this strong demand for mini-grids, especially in sub-Saharan Africa at the moment, and how it fits into the bigger Mission 300 initiative?
So I think, mini-grids are fast to deploy. They're very capital efficient compared to in our case, they're profitable. So they're actually a commercially viable solution for first-time electrification. They also provide, significant impact. And it's more than just providing somebody with a solar rooftop system that can power a cell phone or a few lights. It's actually a generation asset and the transmission and distribution networks to deliver electricity to a whole community. This includes, of course, households, but also small and medium-sized enterprises, agricultural activities, even electric mobility. So I think the attraction of mini-grids for a lot of these governments is that we can actually deliver that level of impact much faster in a very capital efficient way and take some of the financial burden off of the central coffers of national governments, as well as reduce the losses of some of the distribution companies that are currently doing quite poorly economically.
Yeah, well, I looked at the figure, looking at capital expenditure of around 28 to 46 billion US dollars. That's quite a chunk of money if you put that on the table. So how are we doing in terms of these capers? Where's the money coming from? Where can we get it in Africa, in SSA?
So even if it's the high end, $46 billion, somebody was mentioning to me the other day that that's just what Americans spend each year on pet products. So if you put it in that context, the amount of money, even if it's $46 billion, is really a drop in the ocean in terms of international finance. We're talking about 600+ million people in sub-Saharan Africa who still live without electricity. That's unacceptable to everybody, to national governments, to the international development community, to private sector companies like mine who have a mission of really bringing electricity to people for the first time. That capital, I think there's a range of mechanisms for unlocking that capital. It's clear that because the lead time for building mini grids is longer than, say, some of the smaller solar systems that are out there, you really have to front load a fair amount of concessional capital in the first couple of years in order to meet the ambitions for what mini grids can deliver by the end of the decade and achieve SDG 7. So concessional capital is going to be really important. And that means that DFIs, development finance institutions, philanthropic capital, they're going to have to figure out a way to try and pool what typically is a very siloed approach. And then you have to also mobilize a lot of local currency debt. There's a lot of risk associated with currency in sub-Saharan Africa, accessing local currency debt, and you're starting to see that in markets like Nigeria. And then finally, corporate equity. I think there's been a focus on project equity up until this point. There's really a strong need for additional corporate equity. So blending in some of that concessional capital to attract commercial investors that'll then allow us to scale to the degree we need to.
Yeah, I got one important question as far as Outlook is concerned for you, William, after this. Just hang around for a few seconds. We'll be right back. All right, you're watching the Arise Exchange. My conversation with William Branch, the Chief Marketing Officer at Husk Power, talking about Africa's Minigrid and the capital expenditure expectation around $46 billion under the Mission 300 program of the World Bank and the EFDB. Thank you so much, William, for sticking around. Let's talk about your outlook at Husk Power for 2026 as far as the African continent is concerned, and while Nigeria is able to lead the continent of Africa when it comes to Minigrid, how has we been able to achieve that?
So as far as Husk, I mean, we are growing exponentially. We're in the market right now looking to raise an additional $400 million, including equity and debt. And in part because of Mission 300 and for the market opportunity we see and the need we see from a development perspective, we think we've now committed to deploying 1 gigawatts of distributed energy assets across sub-Saharan Africa by 2030. So we're going to be poised for exponential growth in the second half of this year between now and 2028, and then we look to hopefully do an IPO in 2029. As far as Nigeria goes, I think you have to look first and foremost at the political will of the government in Abuja. They've been very clear about the need to bring electricity to the 80 to 90 million people who still live without it in the country. It's a big issue. You also have a massive diesel generation economy that's ripe for replacing. Diesel's expensive, it's polluting. Mini grids are a great path to doing that as well, not only in isolation, but also in partnership with the discos in Nigeria. So the policy framework and the regulatory framework that the government has put in place has really standardized the market. It's actually seen the creation of dozens of mini grid companies, private sector mini grid companies in the country, and really created an industry that didn't exist 5 years ago. So, and you have to point back to the regulatory policy framework because of that. You've got the Rural Electrification Agency, very proactive. Under that, the NEP, which is managing the DARES program, which is a subsidy program to help, accelerate the deployment of mini grids and other energy solutions in Nigeria. None of that would exist without, the political will and the regulatory framework. Plus, you have international institutions like the World Bank, as well as regional African Development Bank, who are putting their money where their mouth is. We've received financing from IFC. We get a subsidy through the Rural Electrification Program for every connection that we make for mini grids. We don't think that that's necessary over the long term, but in terms of catalyzing a market and helping the private sector actually come to the market and deliver the promise of what mini grids can deliver, I think Nigeria has been a shining example of what's possible.
Yes, Nigeria's been a shining example of what's possible. We're going to be touching base with you. I love the sound of the $400 million debt and equity raising, and again, the plan for an IPO. You and I have talked about this for quite some time, and it looks like it's coming home finally. Yeah, that's going to be Go ahead, William.
No, I mean, with support from you and others, we're very excited. We think that we have a chance to really change the game across sub-Saharan Africa and really bring impact to tens of millions of people.
We appreciate what you're doing, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, bringing electricity using mini-grids to deliver electricity to that part of the country here in Nigeria. Thank you so much for what you and the rest of your team are doing, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. Thank you so much, and wish you all the best. Have a great evening out there in Barcelona. That's William Bryan, the Chief Marketing Officer at Husk Power.